Hey guys, Dr. Greg here. We just wrapped up recording today's episode, and Eric and I did a deep dive into what can we add instead of take away, because so many people, when they think about being healthy, is they're like, all right, what are they going to take away from me? So stay tuned. We're going to talk about water. We're going to talk about toothpaste. We're going to talk about healthy fats and a lot of actionable items. So stay tuned for episode. Here we go. Hey guys, Dr. Greg here, and we are back in the studio with Eric, and I'm excited for this episode because when most people think about getting healthy, the first thing that crosses their brain is, what do I have to give up, right? What are my favorite things that I know the doctor is going to say, you got to stop doing this, this, and this. So in today's episode, it's all about, what do we call it? Wellness by addition. So what are the things that you can add to maybe crowd out, but not take away? So if you are Mr. or Miss Deprivation, this one's for you. So, all right. So we got a fun list of things we're going to chat about today. And yeah, that's such a true thing. Like when people go on these like 30-day whatevers, it's all about like, they just feel like they've just sacrificed everything that they love in their life. And now we're not saying that it's not a good idea to do those things. What we have found clinically is when we add things and we get some little victories, then it's a lot easier to maybe take something away.
Totally.
Down the road, right?
Totally.
But you see a lot of comments in our social about people that are like, yeah, I'd like to do this, but I don't want to give up my, fill in the blank.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, food's probably the main one.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things. We got some people with a recent video about endocrine disruptors and telling people they have to give up their Febreze or even their aluminum-containing deodorants.
Right.
That was it's a hard one. I mean,
and I have to, let's speak to that for a second. Even that aluminum thing, right? I mean, like, I have a wife and 3 girls, and I get that you probably, don't want to pit out on things, and so, like, I mean, at some point we have to be able to control what we can control, and we have to like not lose sleep over other things. And in some cases, like you might be like, I don't care what he says, I'm putting the aluminum zirconium on my armpits because this situation is a must. Now, there might be 90% of other situations where you could use the natural deodorant and it'd be fine. So that's kind of this. We also have to talk about the all or nothing principle, right? Because some people are like, if I don't do it 100%, it doesn't work. Or it wasn't good enough. And I think that we have to understand, like, so let's say that, just speaking of deodorant, for example, let's say that once a month you used the bad stuff as opposed to every day of the month.
Yeah, huge.
Right? That's better still, right? So, and I think that we have this personality sometimes that if it's not perfect, it's bad, especially if you're listening to this and you're like a perfectionist mindset and you're a doer and you're like, you can't even fathom what like a little bit off would look like. Yet again, sometimes we get to start there because the sustainability is a conversation that needs to be had as well. So yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that. So yeah, continue.
Yeah, let's go to food, since that's a big one. So I mean, there's plenty of foods we've done videos in the past about some of the stuff to kind of shift out of your diet.
Yes.
Like you were just talking about, maybe it's a little at a time. But I'll put it this way, what's either one food I can add to my diet or maybe a small list of foods that I could add to my diet that might make a difference in a positive way?
I hear you. So I think the lowest hanging fruit is drink more water. It's free in most cases. Now here's the conversation of water, right? Well, which water is best? Just drink water for starters. Now, I'm not a huge fan of municipal waters. I'm not a fan of chlorine and fluoride in water, but also, what if they can't afford the $4,000 water system? Yeah. Go to Walmart or Target or Amazon and buy like a Brita filter. It's better than nothing, and it costs like what, $20-$30? Yeah. And I think, again, remember that there's that mentality of where do I start? What is feasible and doable for me? So the first thing is just drink more water. I personally will tell you that many times when I think I'm hungry, the first question I've asked myself, or trained to ask myself, is, am I just thirsty? And the second question I ask myself, am I bored? Right? Because I just like to eat food. Yeah. So definitely increasing water. Now for people, that might be buying a nice water bottle. Like for, do you have a nice Yeti, for example? Or, by the way, Yeti, if you're listening to this, you should get a hold of us. You should really be a part of what we do. I love your stuff. Shameless plug. Let's just put it there. So having a nice water bottle, that you can carry with you. But then also that nice water bottle also helps you understand. I have a lot of patients that are like, how much water do you drink? They're like, oh, I drink a lot of water. And then I start to like have them dial in like, no, really, how much water are you drinking? I don't know. I really don't know how much water I drink. And I think it's important to like, first, lowest hanging fruit, cheapest thing to do, add more water. Now, you guys see me, on these podcasts with coffee or Zevia, because I get to the point too where I'm like, I don't want to drink more water. I do drink a lot of water. I have a lovely Yeti that's full of stickers, and I love things that are like, for example, I like the fizz of like a seltzered water or a Zevia or a LaCroix type thing. But water's for sure the first thing that they can do. The other thing that I would encourage people to add would be like a healthy fat. Like, go find a way to put a healthy fat into your diet. And some of it might be a this for that type conversation. So for example, like, I love me a good, big, robust Cobb type salad with everything on it. Now, typically, almost all salad dressings, commercial salad dressings, are full of damaged fats. So what if you were a little bit savvy in the kitchen? And by the way, we have a podcast coming up with a chef, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
I'm stoked for that one. Actually, I want to do ones in his kitchen. Like, I want to do a series
awesome.
in his kitchen because I love the kitchen. For those of you that don't know, my mom was actually a home ec major in college, and my mom is like straight up Betty Crocker. That girl cooks from scratch.
Amazing.
She's amazing. Maybe we need to have Nancy on a podcast sometime.
Let's do it.
That would be I don't know. I may not get any words in if my mom's on the podcast, but she would do great. She's a sweet soul. So one of the things that I think we could do is even put in like a how-to healthy salad dressing recipe, because the soybean oils, the vegetable oils, the canola oils are, now again, I'm not telling you to take out of those, get out of this, but they're bad for you. Damaged fats stay in the body for 3 weeks before your body can get rid of them. So what if we swapped? So not just an additional thing, but, and I know this is the addition episode, but what if we swapped? So the first thing is, what if I swapped my commercial salad dressing? And by the way, there are some salad dressings that are out there that are like Primal, for example. They do a good job with their salad dressings. But most of them, even the healthy ones, you're going to see soybean oil or canola oil as your. So what if we swapped that? Now, what could you just add? So how about an avocado? How about, and again, here's a swap, right? Instead of going to the grocery store and buying the commercially raised egg, we just talked about a local farm here. And by the way, if you're from the greater Minneapolis area, we have a hookup for a farm. But if too many people learn about them, I won't be able to get stuff from there anymore. But that's okay.
True.
I'd love to support the farmers. So we actually, let's just give them a plug, right? So we use the Zweber family farm. They're down in Elko, Minnesota, just about 15 miles or so south of the Twin Cities metro. Amazing people. So like, compare their egg from their chicken that gets to be free range and do its thing to a chicken's egg that you get from a factory farm, right? Very different. So there's an example of a swap, like a this for that swap. So another example would be like when you're cooking things, like for example, we use coconut oil a lot of times, like if we're making like an omelet or if we're sauteing vegetables, a good quality coconut oil is just another healthy fat that we can put in things. And then I would say if you're a butter user, and I'm pro butter, like I'm all about having butter, I think it's a very healthy fat, find like a grass-fed butter. Kerrygold is good. There's been some discrepancy on their marketing and how real grass-fed they really are.
Yeah.
However, respectfully, it is better than the normal stuff you'd go and buy from your local grocery store. So, and a lot of these things are things that people like. A lot of people think that eating healthy, like they have to give up. Like I'm a big savory type. Like I have more of a savory taste bud than a sweet taste bud. So like when you have these healthy fats, man, that can really just dive into that savoriness component. So I would say the fats would be the other area that someone could really add into the into the diet.
Okay, so let's go back to, you were talking about water at first, and you did say, and I'm not going to go back on this, but with the water filtration, you said don't get too caught up in the minutia and all this stuff. But we get asked all the time,
Yeah.
like, if someone does want to take that leap into like some
Spend the
good,
money.
maybe the good, better, best model.
Okay.
What would you say? Maybe good's the Brita filter, like just taking a step in the right direction.
Sure.
What's the better and the best?
Oh man. Okay, so that's a good question, and there are opinions in this world, right?
I can imagine.
So, by the way, I have a good friend. His name's Gary Greenfield. He owns a company called, I think, Greenfield Water Systems or something like that. His son, Ben Greenfield's a personal friend of mine. And Gary has, so I'm going to give you Gary's opinions because
Okay.
Gary's has dove into this. So Gary would say that reverse osmosis is, so number one, it's a very clean version of water because there's literally nothing in it. Now, so I would say that, Brita might be number one, reverse osmosis. So maybe Brita, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 bucks for a Brita filter or pitcher. Reverse osmosis, you might be, if you can install it yourself, maybe a couple $100. And so understand that reverse osmosis takes everything out of the water,
Right.
everything. And now what Gary would say, though, is that reverse osmosis is actually dead water. Dead meaning that it's not an energized molecule. Gary's kind of claim to fame with his research, and he actually does a lot of work with the agricultural world. So
Interesting.
he uses this thing called a vortex. And he actually has these vortexers on irrigation lines in farms.
Wow.
So he shows that, field A, right on the same section of land, had the same seed, the same fertilizer, the same everything, but its irrigation pivot had a vortexer. Section of field B, same seed, same fertilizer, same amount of irrigation, same amount of precipitation, but the water was not vortexed. So long story short, what he talks about with this conversation of being vortexed is it's called structuring the water. So that H2O molecule becomes more bioavailable than maybe just something flowing through those lines. Now, respectfully, I do not understand all of that. I actually have spoken to Gary. He'd love to be on our podcast and geek out with us. And I think he'd be a great person because in my world, there's this huge group of people that love distilled water. So, and there's this distilling is like, it's called steam distillation. So you have your water that's filtered and then you boil it, and actually it's the steam that you collect. And Gary would once again tell you, like reverse osmosis, that distilled water is not an alive or bioactive water. So my wife and I found that it was a good investment for us. So let me just give you a little conversation. So in the clinic here, which is where the studio is at, we have an under sink filtration and vortex unit from Greenfield Water Systems, and I think it was about $600. Okay. But it only does the water that goes to the little water spigot, and then we send it also to the fridge for the ice and the water in the fridge here. So those are the only three places that get that water. Now in our house, my wife and I felt that it was a good investment to do. So we literally filter every drop of water in our house. The only water that does not get filtered is like our lawn sprinkler. However, I do have a vortexer. Going back to that agricultural conversation, so my irrigation line has a vortexer on it, and I will tell you that I have the greenest lawn by a long shot. I am the envy of my neighbors, but what they don't know is that a big part of it is I don't use all the chemicals that they do. I vortex the line that's going out there.
Wild.
So what we do have is this pretty sizable unit that filters every drop of water in our house and vortexes it, and then what we do with that. But in our kitchen, we have like one of those little like spigots. We have a remineralizer filter that puts healthy minerals back into our water. By the way, just so you guys know, we do have a remineralizer on this filter here at the clinic also. So now for my whole house, we're looking, I think it was about $4,500 to do our entire house. But for me, man, I'm showering in that water. We're washing our clothes in that water. We're cooking with that water. My kids are washing their faces with that water. So we felt it was a good investment for our house. So there's the deep dive. And like I said, we'll get Gary on the podcast and talk more about water because I really believe what I didn't say on this was, oh, your tap water is just fine. Because it's not.
Well, we actually, one of our clinicians here, Laura Donna, put together some great research about all this. There's a book called Non-Toxic Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World. And they get into it. They talk about what is in municipal water. And again,
You can research it.
yeah.
You can like put your zip code in and
just
they're like,
a quick
oh,
hit list here. Pharmaceutical and farming chemicals, bacteria, viruses, radionucleotides, microplastics, metals, fecal waste, and medication are all capable of ending up at public water treatment plants in the United States.
Think about that, right? I just heard a statistic. I was just listening to a seminar before I came in today, and I heard that 250 pounds of chemicals per day per person are introduced into the United States.
Wow.
That's got to be scary a little
Disturbing,
bit.
yeah.
Disturbing, right? So, and you have to think about like chlorine and fluoride. Well, chlorine at least is in public water to kill things in the water. So that's good, but then you're ingesting them. By the way, you're a living thing, right? So it's probably not the best thing for you to have.
Yeah.
And then fluoride's a whole nother crazy conversation. I know that there's probably dentists that are listening to this right now that will just turn me off because they think I'm stupid. I actually went rounds with one of my children's dental hygienists a couple of months ago. She actually had the audacity to tell me that the tooth was made of fluoride, and I was like, "Oh, you skipped class that day." But fluoride makes a tooth. So, is there research that fluoride can have some altercation of dental cavities? Yes, but how? That's the question. How? What it does, what fluoride does to a tooth. Please listen to me. What fluoride does to a tooth is it makes it hard but brittle. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if you have a little kid, look at their toothpaste. If you give your kid fluoride toothpaste, look at it. It'll say, if swallowed, contact poison control. You ever seen a little kid brush their teeth? Half of it they swallow because fluoride is not known to be at that level, but yet we put it in our water supply. But just so you know, there's many countries in the world that have outlawed fluoride. So just because we're the United States of America does not mean that we have the best information, because unfortunately, and I love what's happening in our world right now is because the peels are being pulled back. People are starting to ask questions. They're starting to question. And some of these things, when you actually understand, you're like, okay, like if that's the truth, then why are we doing this, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so it's time to start being a little bit curious.
Yeah. And the thing is, I would love to see more conversation. I actually did some work with a toothpaste company before starting here. And yeah, it's crazy. There are alternatives to fluoride that, one of our recent videos, for instance, quite a few commenters were saying, okay, fluoride's bad, but there's no alternative. Well, it's not true. There's hydroxyapatite, nanohydroxyapatite are these two ingredients in major conversation, studied to be exactly equivalent with the effect of fluoride, and yet you never hear about them, but there it is. So.
Well, and here's the thing, right? So like, for example, I use a toothpaste called Vitae. And full disclosure, I'm one of the investors in the company. I know Dr. Curatola, who's like the founder of the company, world-renowned dentist from New York City in the Hamptons area. People just don't know about it.
Yeah.
But does Revitin have the same marketing budget as Procter and Gamble?
Of course not.
Never, ever. And the other thing is, it's funny because so for example, the people that don't like Revitin is because it doesn't give them mouth tingle.
Yeah.
That people are used to thinking that mouth. They would say that mouth tingle makes me feel like my mouth is clean.
Totally.
And there are some natural, like we've used Tom's of Maine fluoride-free stuff before, but they are out there, like you said. But that's the thing, like we don't want to like just leave people hanging on this podcast. We want to be like, okay, if not this, then this. And I think that's a legit question. Is like, okay, like I hear you, but you can't leave me hanging here, man. Like, what do I do? What do I do for my family here?
Yeah.
Good question.
Let's talk about adding movement into your day. You have a term, manageable movement. So first of all, can you explain what that means? And then what's an example of like a manageable movement I could add into my daily routine?
That's a good question. And for everyone, it's going to be different. One of the comments that I love when I get on initial evaluations with patients in our clinic here, whether it's on Zoom or in person, they're like, and if you've seen some of my older TikTok, I usually like sit and walk. While I'm walking, I talk. And they're like, dude, that's cool that you go on a lot of walks. And it's also like pretty cool that you like aren't out of breath when you're trying to talk. I'm a large dude. I'm 6'3", 250 pounds. I'm an ex-inside linebacker. So what I don't really care for is going for a run. It's not manageable for me. My knees hurt, my ankles hurt, my hips hurt. It's just not enjoyable at all. But I could go for a 15-mile walk right now, and I'd be like, that's so good. And it's not just the walk that I love. What do I do when I walk? I do one of three things. Number one, I do nothing. And by the way, we can't discount what nothing is. One of my mentors says, if you can't spend 10 minutes with yourself by yourself, you got issues. And that's a whole nother podcast that we can talk about that kind of stuff. The second thing is I love listening to books. I am not the type of guy that will typically sit down and read a book. I don't sit still very well. So if I can go for a walk, and I typically listen at a book between 1.5 and 2.5 speed, and I can kill two birds with one stone. And then what I do when I walk is I have my notes app open on my phone. So if there's a nugget in the book, I will pause the book and then like voice dictate a note into my app. So it's not like I don't have the ability to dive into and cultivate some of the things inside of there. And then the other thing is when I would shoot TikTok videos, I would do that. Okay, but what is manageable? You know, someone might say, did he just say a 15-mile walk? Like, that's crazy. What if the walk, okay, manageable movement. We all move in some fashion. You know, so there can be, I think movement, like we could put it into like two categories. Movement A could be like more of a cardiovascular movement. So that might be, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go take the dog for a walk. I love how people, when they get dogs, like the dog needs to go for a walk. I'm like, I'm sure glad the owner is taking the dog for a walk because the owner needs to walk as well. Yeah. So I think I like walking. I think there's something magical about walking. I think it's completely underrated. I think that people are like, oh, I just go for walks and it really doesn't do much. I'm like, no, seriously, like it is highly, highly beneficial. It's easy on your joints. You can carry on a conversation. You're not getting winded and you can lose weight walking. There's proof there. So I'm a walker. I like walking. I think walking is really good. Now, the other part might be like resistance with movement. Now, someone might say, oh, here he goes. He's going to tell me to go get a gym membership. No. You actually gave a course to our team yesterday, and it talked about James Clear and atomic habits, and you dove into Jocko Willnick's work with discipline equals freedom, and you talked about creating a cue to have a response. So, for example, here's just an example that I have done in the past. So we have a big clinic here, and I have an office in this clinic, and there's many times that I'm in and out of my office throughout the day. So I have a cue that when I walk into my office, I drop and do 10 push-ups. Now, my goal is to do 100 push-ups a day. But what I cannot do, respectfully, is I cannot sit down and knock out 100 push-ups at once. But what I know is that 10 good push-ups sprinkled out in 10 sets over 8 hours is still highly beneficial. But my cue is when I walk through that door in my office, I know drop and give me 10. So because what I wanted to do is get stronger. So there's an example of how a cue can trigger I just walked in my office, time to do push-ups. For some people it might be an air squat. Just simply get in a good squat position, come down to your legs level, come back up, do 10 of those. Someone might be like, dude, I can't even do a push-up. And I get that. A lot of people listening to this probably can't do a push-up.
Right.
Well, what if you leaned up against a wall and you stood and you pushed against the wall? You got to start someplace. The thing I also loved about what you talked about us was stringing days together. And maybe we know that there's some apps available. We don't necessarily know what they are, so I'm gonna throw us under the bus and say in the show notes we're gonna find an app, because what you said, and I actually have patients that even say, like I have a patient that says I remember when he said I've done 100 days straight of cold showers. And I was like, dude, that's amazing. Yeah. My uncle just finished, he just hit day 1,000 of either riding a bike in some fashion, whether on a trainer or on a road or on a trail. That's amazing. Yeah. So what our body's like is parlaying win upon win. So for, in the case of doing push-ups, or maybe it's even I went for a walk. I moved today. And then just define what movement is, at least 3 minutes, at least 10 minutes, and then award yourself in a fashion of like, hey, I've done 34 days straight. And then you spoke to this yesterday too. You're like, I don't want to break the streak.
Yeah.
Like the streak is alive and I don't want to break it. And I think there's something to that. I think again, what that does, that snowballs those wins together. And then the next thing you know is maybe that 3-minute walk turned into a 13-minute walk, which turned into a 30-minute walk. And the next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, knowing that you probably couldn't have started there, but you over time built up. Exactly. A lot of us have this mentality that if I can't do 45 minutes right away or I can't do it 100%, screw it. And then they don't start.
Exactly.
Which is worse than start simple, snowball them together, and roll from there. So something with movement like cardio, like a walk, something with strength, resistance, like a push-up or a squat. Start simple. But don't be like, well, all that I do is just. How defeating is that? I hate the word just. For example, we see a lot of females in our practice, and I've caught some women before saying, I'm just a housewife or I'm just a stay-at-home mom, and I'm like, whoa, you are not just in anything. And by the way, if you're a stay-at-home mom listening to this, you are amazing. You are a huge part of your house. I have a stay-at-home wife. You have a stay-at-home wife. We know that we can't do what we do or are able to do if they aren't doing that. Like I tell my wife, she's the CEO of the house. Like you run this ship. I have 5 kids. You have 2 kids with 1 on the way. And that's a huge deal. So hopefully so if you're listening to this again, if you're that mom, like you matter and you are a huge part of your family. And don't let anybody, especially yourself, tell you that you are just in anything. So hopefully that lands for somebody.
Love that. Yeah, so true too. Let's talk about the idea of a healthy home. So again, talking about addition here, is there something I can do or buy or, some routine I can add to my day that just makes my living environment a healthier place to live? I don't have the research in front of me, but another thing our clinician and researcher Laura Donna put together was just crazy statistics about how this is research, I believe, by the World Health Organization. And it's just crazy statistics of how many disease processes and everything starts from a bad living environment or a toxic living environment.
Interesting.
I want to say it was something like 23% of all. You don't fact check me on that. Maybe we have to put that one in the show notes or something. But it's more than you'd think start from the home and the air quality and this kind of stuff. So what can I do that kind of promotes a better living environment?
That's a good question. There's also research, so let's just talk about the cleanliness of the home. There's also research that homes that are too clean create like this sterile environment. Totally. I have friends that, I grew up in ranching country, but I didn't grow up on a ranch. But my friends that grew up on ranches had like no allergies. Because the reality is there was like cow poop and horse poop in the air all the time, and they became very resilient. So, and there are some things that are pointed to too sterile of an environment. So there is a happy medium, I would say, inside of that. So I think there is something to air quality. We talk a lot in this practice about mycotoxins and mycotoxin illness. So the first thing, do not pass go, do not collect $200 if there's any water damage in your space, if there's anything that would have if there's a leaky pipe, if there's a window that's not put on right, if there's anything that has allowed the environment for mold or mildew to grow, I don't care what else you're doing in your house, you gotta take advantage of that. It's a huge deal. And we had so if you need to listen to it, I did a whole series of podcasts with a mold expert, and he said it's your intuition that would make you think that you should probably go get it tested. So that would be number one. We do, but so there's that balance, right, of way too clean and this place looks like a horse pasture, right? So it's just that conversation of even, one of the things I think, and I'm going to talk about, we talked about Febreze and, things that have fragrances. I think that's one thing that people don't know enough about. These things are called endocrine disruptors. The term is called a phytoestrogen or a xenoestrogen. Phyto means fake, and xeno means it can alter the estrogenic component. And by the way, if you're a guy or a girl, I think that's everyone listening to this podcast, estrogen at the right balance is amazing for us, but when estrogen gets thrown off, that is bad stuff. So I would say let's look at what we're doing to the air. So number one are just simple like filtration. Are you going in and just looking at your filters of your furnace? How often are you replacing them? And there's a healthy balance of that as well, because if you're putting these monster, amazing filters, it actually is really hard on your furnace because your furnace is trying to suck air through this like thing that's not letting air through. But also, I've known people that just like, we just take the filter out. And I was like, well, there's a role for that filter. So I would be, we're probably quarterly in our house, and now some people are monthly. We keep our house pretty clean, so it's not like we live in the city. We don't live out in the country where there's things around. So I would do that. I would look at your laundry detergents. Big no-nos. Fabric softeners. Do not use fabric softeners. Those things, I can smell those things from a mile away. And I get that they make your fabric soft. However, there are some pretty nasty chemicals inside of those components. Also, like laundry sheets, got to be careful of those because there's a lot of perfumes in the laundry sheets as well. Staying on the tune of cleaning things, go down to your kitchen, look at dishwasher detergent, look at soaps that you might be using. We could go to the beauty cabinet. It's somewhere like the average woman puts on 400 to 600 chemicals a day on their face. So now we're looking at lotions and cosmetics, makeups, perfumes, huge components there. And this list could go on. And I'm just trying to think of some of the things that we're doing in our house that we're trying to be mindful of. And there's a pile of things. We can talk more about indoor air quality because I think that's going to be important to talk about. I think especially where you sleep. I spend the most time in my house in bed because I sleep there every single night. So what is that environment? What does that environment look like? What is the air quality in your bedroom? I had a new patient yesterday from New Jersey, and she said every single morning when I wake up, I am plugged. However, if I go to other areas of the house, I'm not as plugged. And I'm like, is there something in your bedroom that could be getting? Is there a bad window? Is there something? And she even had a hunch. Because remember I talked about intuition. She had a hunch of, she's like, I save all these Amazon boxes in my closet. I wonder if, and I was like, first place to check. Go figure that out. So yeah, those are some things to do in the house. So with that said, let's take a little break and let's transition, jump to a little commercial and continue on.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben, one of Dr. Greg's producers. Thanks for tuning into the Daily Dose with Dr. Greg. We appreciate every single one of our listeners, and we know that our audience is expanding all over the world. If you are interested in working with Dr. Greg and Vitae Clinic, all you have to do is click the link in this episode's show notes. Also, we want to bring people as much value as possible, so I have a favor to ask. If you found value in this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Sharing goes a long way, and we appreciate it. All that said, let's jump back into the conversation with Eric and Dr. Greg.
Talk to me about your coffee. I know you're a coffee snob. You're kind of the ultimate. No one dares to come into this clinic with a Starbucks in hand or a Caribou. But
it's funny that you say that.
Tell me about your coffee. I know you use a very specific brand that some of our listeners are already familiar with.
Right.
But give us that and the why. But also, give me a little more specific. What's your roast? What do you put in your coffee?
Okay, so funny story. So this morning, I met with a friend at a commercial coffee shop, Starbucks, and I got a blonde Americano, and I was on this little table, and I shifted my laptop, and I literally dumped an entire Americano on the ground everywhere. And he's like, "Oh, I can go get you another coffee," and I was like, "Nah." I really don't like this coffee anyway. I just figured if I'm going to come here and use their table, I kind of gave my $4.50, contribution. So that's just a funny story from this morning. Okay, I do like coffee, and for me, coffee, I really don't need the caffeine. I'm highly driven. I don't need life doesn't continue until I have my whatever caffeine. The story I've told, and I think and actually I love when my parents come and visit me. My parents are workers. Like, probably workaholic workers. So growing up, one of the only times when I think of my childhood, some of the only times I'd ever see my dad sit down and chill would be to sip a cup of coffee. And I actually like my coffee really hot because you can't chug hot coffee.
True.
So part of me, it's a very psychosomatic thing that says, sit down, chill, don't chug, enjoy. And so with that being said, understanding, so we did a video last winter. And it was just like, hey guys, we know that coffee beans are one of the most common moldy substances in the world. 60% of Americans drink coffee. I probably dumped moldy coffee on the ground at the coffee shop this morning, whatever. And who's out there, right? So who do you know? So we talked to our hundreds of thousands of listeners. Who's out there that we should know about? And holy Toledo, did we get some responses, right?
Yeah.
And respectfully, one of the overriding themes was this company called Lifeboost, right? Like, you guys need to learn about Lifeboost. You gotta try them. So we just shot them a hey, what's up? And it turned into this amazing relationship. So I got on a call early on with the owner of the company and heard about what they do and how they do it. Not only do they roast a really good coffee bean, well, you start by growing it. So number one, they work with families in Central America, and they support these families to the point where there's even schools for the workers' kids, which I'm all over that. I think that's amazing. And then not only that, they test the coffee for over 400 different chemicals, mold, glyphosate. So then this stuff is very clean and pure. Well, that's great, but it has to taste good, right? So they do single origin, which all that bean came from the same place. They have a proprietary roasting process. It's very low acid. So when they sent us some stuff, I was like, okay, this is amazing. And you're a coffee guy too, and you're like,
oh, yeah.
all right, we're up to something. And that just started a great relationship. And I'll tell you what, I mean, it's you get what you pay for with most things in life. And the coffee's not cheap. However, it's also not crazy expensive. There are some other brands that we looked at, we're like, whoa, holy Toledo. So prior to Lifeboost, I was a light roast guy. So for example, you heard me order a blonde Americano because I despise over roasted bean. To me, it has a burnt flavor to it. So I started with their light roast, and I was like, it's almost too light. So now I actually drink the dark roast. But it's the only dark roast that I'll ever drink. If I go to a restaurant, or my parents love really dark roast coffee, it is so bitter. It is so acidic. So I actually do enjoy, I'll drink coffee in about 3 different ways. By far and away, the most common way that I'll drink it is just black. The second way, depends on kind of what I'm doing dietarily, is I will add either butter or C8 MCT oil or organic heavy cream. And then I also will add a English toffee flavored stevia drop and put that in my coffee and blend it up and sip that. And I also don't mind a cold brew. Actually, Lifeboost makes a really good cold brew option. I actually learned about cold brew when we lived in Hawaii. So I would go to the coffee shop, they're like, do you want it hot or cold? And I was like, cold coffee? What are you talking about? But the reality, it's 85 degrees in Hawaii, and it's hot and it's humid. So what I found is that there's times that actually cold brew can be very, very refreshing. So if I do a cold brew, I'll actually put the heavy cream and the MCT oil and the stevia in my cup first, and then I take one of those handheld blenders and I'll froth the cream, so it's almost like whipped cream, and then I pour the cold brew on top of that. And I don't know, it's just got a unique little taste to it. So that's the 3 ways that I'll consume a dark roast Lifeboost coffee. There you have it.
I love that. And by the way, we would totally promote. We love Lifeboost so much here. I think we'd promote them without the affiliate link, but we do have one.
Okay.
So we'd be remiss not to tell people they can get, I think it's 50% off using your
amazing.
link, coffeewithdoc.com, DOC. So
yeah, so just go to coffeewithdoc.com and they can take advantage of that. It'll be in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So moving on from coffee, even though I could talk about coffee all day. I love it.
It's good stuff.
But let's go. What's the scoop with saunas? So it's kind of, I bring it up because it's trendy right now.
Okay.
And I mean, I'll spoil it a little bit. I know you've been on board with a very specific kind of sauna usage since before it was trendy, but now we're kind of seeing it become like this hyped up thing.
Right.
So what's the reality behind that?
Man, how deep do I go here, right? So, okay, so I use the company that I use, Therasage, because number one, I know Robbie and Melody Besner, the owners of the company, and Robbie he's a researcher, he's a scientist. They have done research on their products. Their sauna has middle, near, and far infrared therapy. They also use red light therapy in their saunas. And more importantly, and I think a lot of companies use middle, near, far, maybe use red light. A lot of other companies, and this was kind of my selling feature, kind of what like sealed the deal for me, is Robbie is like, I dare you to take a Gauss meter into our competitors' devices. So what a Gauss meter is this thing that measures EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies. And he's like, we shield ours to a way that you are essentially receiving next to no EMFs inside of our unit. And he said some of those other ones, you are literally enveloping yourself in an electromagnetic blanket.
Oof.
So that's not so great. Another reason why we like Therasage is their customer service. We have a patient actually who lives here. He's from New Zealand, and he travels with his. He's a construction worker, so he has one for his house, and then he has one for his truck that he travels with. And he had some issues, and he directly contacted the company, and they took care of him. And I mean, customer service means a lot. We have probably an affiliate link, or we sell them, but we do not service them.
Right.
So it's nice to have that aspect. The other thing that I like about some of the offers that they do, so in our house we have a full Therasage 360 sauna, and then we also have two other devices that they make. We have a heating pad, which is essentially a chunk of the sauna without you having to go inside. So the sauna, I mean, I like a hot sauna. I sweat buckets inside of the sauna. Well, that takes some preparation. It takes some, like, okay, how are we going to do this? What's my timing of doing this? I have to go jump in the shower right afterwards. But they also make a heating pad, and a heating pad is something like last night we were watching football on TV, and my wife had the heating pad over like her liver abdomen area. You don't necessarily sweat, and you can do it while you've got your street clothes on and roll. Our dog loves the heating pad. She will bury herself. She's just a little 6-pound Yorkie. She will bury herself under if someone has the heating pad on. She loves the heat, but just what if she was intuitive enough to go like, this infrared therapy is good for me as a little puppy. So we have that, and then the red light panels in the saunas. People, and if you own a Therasage sauna, you may not know this. You can actually take those out of the sauna, and then Therasage sells a cord, like a 12 or 15-foot cord that plugs into just like a USB outlet, and then you can have a red light panel. So for example, there's research with red light with hair loss, with acne, or you can just put red light over your organs and it can act as a standalone device as well. So, and because it works with the USB, you could even put it in your vehicle and you could rock out the red light from that standpoint. So I am a fan. It's a huge part of our deep dive journey that we do here at the clinic. Your liver function, your drainage pathways, the sauna, it helps with liver, it helps sweat, it helps just things dump from that standpoint. And if people are vain listening to this, they actually did research that shows that I think it's 20 minutes at 150 degrees in the sauna burns 500 calories.
So great.
That's pretty clutch, right? So if you're looking for a little weight loss hack, and the thing that I also love about their saunas compared to like the big fully enclosed one is that your head sticks out of the top. Why that's important is a couple reasons. Number one, your head is not designed to take on heat. So if you're in a traditional sauna, the hottest part of your body, thanks to thermodynamics, heat rises, is your head. I do not recommend doing handstands in saunas. So what happens then with the Therasage is we can actually take the heat quite a bit higher because the head sticks out of the top. So that's important to know as well. And they are a single person sauna. So one of the things that people may not know is I traveled with the Olympic wrestling team for some time, and the wrestlers would traditionally go in these big group saunas and sweat, like 20 guys in one room all sweating together. But understand, you detox in a sauna. So do you really want to breathe in someone else's stuff. Also, if you're in the sauna by yourself, that little sweaty butt spot to your right, like that's effervescing as well. So just not to gross you out, but think about it a little bit. And yes, multiple people use the infrared sauna in our house. We just clean it out with like an essential oil type cleaner each time, and we put towels over the chair. So we don't. Not every person in our house has their own sauna. We share the sauna, but only one person can be in it at a time. So I am a fan of saunas, and they're in respect to, like, we just on this episode we talked about a $4,000 water filter, right? So a sauna is like, I don't know, $1,100-$1,200 for a sauna. Though you don't have to use a sauna to get well. It's a tool, and if it works in your budget, I would say pull the trigger. Go for it.
Great. So anyone who's listened to this podcast or followed you on social media long enough knows that you're a big test, don't guess guy. It's kind of your motto here.
Right.
I would also add to that and say you're really not a this for that supplement guy
Right.
either. Like, there's all these products out here. They are beneficial in different ways, but we don't this for that people. And I've joked on this podcast before, we could really sell a lot of supplements if you could get behind one of these magic cures out there.
Right.
But all this aside, maybe the answer is no, there is not. But without prescribing, without recommending, is there anything, generally speaking, the average person, or let's just say the majority or significant amount of people could benefit from supplement-wise, just broadly speaking?
It's a really good question. And how I would answer that is I would say success leaves clues. I don't know how many labs I'm deep into the laboratory reading world. I bet I'm north of 100,000. So the question, what you're really asking is, hey, if someone chooses not to run labs and we had to make a couple guesses, I'd rather test, but if we had to guess, the top 2 things that I see on labs. Number 1, low vitamin D. Number 2, low vitamin B12, oddly enough. Now, what I'm not saying is run out and take vitamin D and B12. The question, first off, has to be, let's talk a little bit about that. So vitamin D was misnamed. Whoever named that sucker screwed it up. Vitamin D is actually a hormone. Okay, so if your vitamin D is low, which, I mean, I rarely see even adequate, or I rarely ever see optimal levels of vitamin D in a person's blood panel.
Wow.
By the way, optimal is between 80 and 100. And I also use one product. So we use a product called DV3, and I've used that alone. I actually just took mine this morning. It's because a good vitamin D product from a vitamin shelf will have one ingredient, D3. A better vitamin D product will have 2 ingredients, D3 and K2. The DV3 has 21 ingredients, so it has the cofactors that go in. Now, let me speak a little bit more in depthly with vitamin B12. What is B12? There's this thing called pernicious anemia. We know that B12 is used in some of the energetic, like Krebs cycle conversations. So if vitamin B12 is low, instead of doing the this for that, the first question I have to ask is, why is your vitamin D low? Well, if there's something going on in your system that's using a lot of cellular energy, it would make sense that vitamin B12 is low. So the first thing we have to kind of look around and go, all right, is there something that is gobbling up energy here? Physical stress, emotional stress, toxicity, infection. And then if that's the case, well then just taking vitamin D is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It really doesn't fix anything. So if you're that person or you've had vitamin B12, and the ranges are crazy. The medical range, the medical lab, like 235 to 1240 or something like that is the range. I always tell people, like, who can't jump into that lake? What I've found is that typically people feel best when it's in that like 1200 to 1500 range. That's when they feel best. The other lab that correlates very, very strongly with vitamin B12 is homocysteine. And homocysteine, we want that 6 or less. The lab that we use says 9 or less is the range, but 6 or less. And if you have low B12, you're almost guaranteed to have elevated homocysteine. And elevated homocysteine is linked to some crazy stuff. Like, it is an inflammatory marker. It impacts the heart. It impacts the liver. There's even conversation of mental emotional ramifications of elevated homocysteine. And man, that is the canary in the coal mine with so many things. So now, and it's funny that you say that because we put together protocols for our patients based upon lab work. So I even said to one of our clinicians yesterday, I'm like, man, I wish that I could have one capsule that has DV3 plus. We use a product called MORS in this practice, MORS. I like it. I said it'd be nice if we could put both of those into one capsule. We could get like two birds with one stone, because it is by far and away the top two things that I see that are necessary based upon labs. So that's, from a laboratory standpoint, that's what we're seeing here.
Okay. Let's speak to, this is a question that comes up a lot. So speak to parents for a minute. Again, we'll have to speak generally because we can't possibly know personal cases, but what's one thing parents can do to foster just better health for their kids?
Man, that's a good question. So my wife and I have 5 kids, and our kids range from 18 down to 5. So we go 18, 15, 12, 8, and 5. And even my kids don't always love healthy food or healthy choices. Okay, this is a good question. Here's what, and by the way, this is my wife. So again, if you're that stay-at-home mom, this is my wife's thing that she figured out. A lot of times as parents, we think of parenting and we want to, discipline. Sometimes talks is a bad thing. Like, if you do something wrong, I'm going to discipline you. However, discipline can also even be encouraging good things. So we do commissions in our house where our kids have tasks and we reward those tasks. And the reality is, it's not, I don't think that's a bad thing, because if you do a bunch of wrong things, it's going to cost you. So why not teach your kids that if you're doing good things, you can be rewarded? So what we actually do is we have healthy lifestyle things for our kids. For example, tell me 3 things you're grateful for. We incentivize for that. Did you take your vitamins today? We incentivize for that. Isn't that interesting? So instead of being like, hey, I'm going to discipline you when you do something wrong, no, we're going to incentivize you doing the things that are right.
Interesting. So
what I would do if you're a parent, and this, now, does my 15-year-old need to be paid to take his vitamins? No, dude, Jaden, take your vitamins. Though for him, I have paid my older kids to read books and create a report for me. And my Jaden loves to listen. So he loves listening to like Richard Branson stuff, and he listened to Shoe Dog, the story about Nike, and he's into that stuff. So why not incentivize those things? Why not cultivate the good instead of reprimand the bad? So I would dangle a carrot for kids. Like, respectfully, we're all commission-based employees in some fashion, and if you're like, no, I'm hourly, well, stop doing your job for a while and see how it works for you, right? So I think that set up a thing where you're like, hey, this is such a big deal that we're actually going to positively, and it doesn't mean that you have to pay them money. Like, it might be something that's more appropriate for your family, but also don't let your love for your child be dictated based upon whether they do that thing or not. Like, love is love. Love is I love you regardless of how you act. And also acceptance. Like, I believe, and I love my parents. I believed that my acceptance was based upon my accomplishments. How many football awards did I have? How many basketball awards did I have? How good was I in the eyes of my parents? That is how I judged how good is Greg. So I think it's also to make sure that we're careful that they're doing or not doing is not how your child is internalizing their acceptance inside of that. So so find something that's age appropriate and encourage them and make it fun, and then you got to stick to your guns. Like, if they don't do it, then they don't get the reward, right? As nicely as I can say this, I am not a participation trophy family. We don't do that in our house. Like first place is first place. And if you participated, I hope you gave it your best, but you don't deserve anything. Like you have to earn, not be given things. And my wife was a 2-sport college athlete, so we're drivers inside of that. Yet we are truly doing our very best to create children that will someday be husbands and wives and moms and dads and managers and coworkers and makers inside of this society as opposed to takers. And we take that super seriously.
I love that. So here's a fun one. When you travel, do you have any must-have things that you bring with you? Let's just say beyond the typical. So beyond the clothes and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
my sleep mask.
Really?
I
Okay.
do not sleep without a sleep mask. Ever. I have I use this thing. Maybe we can put a link to this in the show notes. I have a sleep mask. A friend of mine was the team doctor for the U.S. water polo team. And I don't know if they got sponsored by them, but he's like, hey, you should try it. It's great. It's nice and soft. You can wash it every single night, hands down. Regardless of where I sleep, I wear a sleep mask. That may not be what people expected to hear inside of this.
No.
I actually typically don't travel with supplements. We don't spend... Now, if we're going to go away for like a couple weeks, then I will bring kind of like my little remedy kit. Like I'll bring binders, I'll bring some liver support, I'll bring some antivirals, some antibacterials. But when we travel, man, I got my sleep mask with me.
I love that. My wife, Brooke, is actually known for being the person in the hotel room who finds every light source in the room and blocks it off methodically. So
That a girl.
maybe the sleep mask is a
Fix
better
it all with
option.
one felt swoop. Like even like rolling the towel up because the light from the hallway comes
Yes.
into the room. But
Yeah.
yeah, a sleep mask. But however, I mean, she's a mom, right? She's that mother she's not just for herself. She's like, yeah, but my kids don't wear sleep masks. So if I block that light, then I protect the babies.
Yeah.
They think different than us, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Thank goodness.
I've got one last question
Yeah.
for you here. What are your, and you already did a few of these earlier to be fair, but what are some of your favorite low-cost swaps that people can make for better health? So
Yeah.
you already went with like some of the healthy fats swapping in and out,
Yep.
but what else is
Yep.
there?
Eggs. Free range eggs. And not cage free, because there's a whole definition of cage free versus free range. So free range eggs, I would say, we talked about the fats, swapping good fats for bad fats, deodorants, unquestionably from that standpoint. Toothpaste is another one. Laundry detergent, soaps, dishwasher detergent, other swaps, this for that stuff. Let me think here. Cooking, cookware. So a lot of people have aluminum-based cookware or Teflon cookware. So once you by the way, if those have a scratch in them, it's typically aluminum. That is the metal underneath the Teflon. By the way, aluminum is why I'm telling you not to have antiperspirant. Okay, so maybe shifting towards stainless steel or cast iron. I'm a big Le Creuset and Staub fan.
Oh,
I love the cooking with their stuff. But yeah, I think those would be some good places to start.
Cool. And interestingly, maybe you know of more of them, but I know for sure a lot of people have left comments along the lines of like, how on earth are you supposed to keep track of good versus bad? There are some apps that are helpful. Like I know EWG has an app.
Right, the Environmental Working Group.
I forget which others, but there's other apps out there that are kind of barcode scanner type deals. And
There's
they'll give
definitely
you-
ones for, my wife uses, I don't remember what it is, but one for like makeup and
Yes,
hair care
yeah.
products. And there's like, she's like, they rank them. Just familiarize yourself. You don't have to memorize these things. Just be
Exactly.
resourceful, right? Good stuff.
Exactly. Well, that's all I have
Whew,
for you.
there we go. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Oh, remember we talked about DV3 on this podcast. So if wherever you listen to this podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Every time there's a podcast and you leave a review, you're going to go into a drawing, and I'm going to give away a bottle of DV3, my go-to vitamin D product. Let us bless you with that. A little. You do this for me, I'll do this for you kind of standpoint. We really appreciate that. We exist to empower people. We exist so that you can be like, oh my gosh, thank you. You are my go-to health source. So share this, like us, tell your friends about it. It really, truly means a lot to us. So Eric, always a fun opportunity to chat with you back and forth, and stay tuned for our next episode.